30 years, and right now I'm doing the national campaign for financial literacy.
Oh, yep. That's great. We were just talking about education. So we're going to go ahead and start the session now. So Renee, I'm going to put you on a spotlight video here. And then why don't you introduce yourself, say about where you live and what you do or did for an occupation.
Okay, well, my name's Renee Gaye, and I live on Rock Canyon Circle, which is right at what used to be the old entrance, but now is the new entrance to Alum Rock Park. So when we moved in, this entrance was closed. Then after all those mudslides, this entrance is open and it's pretty hot. All cars coming and going all the time. But anyway, so I'm on Rock Canyon Circle. I grew up in Chicago. I had a big Jewish family and we celebrated Hanukkah together all the time. Latkes was always the big part of it. And I'm going to show you a picture. This is my Uncle Max. Oh. And in all our family Hanukkah parties, Uncle Max was in charge of the latkes. And he was a latke purist. He had all of these rules about making latkes, and he taught me how to make them. But you'd have to grate the potatoes by hand and grate the onions by hand and separate the eggs out and soak the potatoes to get the extra. It was very complicated. And I still sometimes make his recipe, but it's complicated. And sometimes it doesn't come out. Like sometimes they don't hold together. So every year around, a couple weeks before Hanukkah, I used to get latke anxiety. Was I going to have a latke fail this year? So I was at my mother-in-law's in Santa Barbara one year. I didn't plan it, but we were there because she needed more help than we could, than we had planned. And so I was stuck there and had to make latkes. It was Hanukkah, and I, just wasn't prepared to do all the Uncle Max stuff. So I found a quick cheater's recipe to latkes, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So I do have, a more pure latke recipe, but I'm going to show you the cheater's way, and it's really quick and easy, and it always comes out good. As far as my story, I've lived in the Berryessa area, I'd say since the early 1980s, and raised my kids here. I taught for Hewlett-Packard as a technical trainer. I taught computer classes to IT guys for the last 25 years, and I just recently retired in March. Perfect timing. And so I've been doing a lot of cooking and playing around, doing a few cooking events with some of the other women's organizations that I belong to. So that's my story.
Yeah, you said you did the same class with the Jewish Federation, or what was it?
No, I belong to an organization called Hadassah. It's a women's organization. You don't have to be Jewish, but most of the people are. It's called Hadassah, and we raise money for hospital and research in Israel. So the Hadassah Hospital in Israel is world renowned, and they, do all kinds of research, and they serve anybody who comes. It's not, but in the US, it's mostly Jewish women that belong to that organization. And then, I've done some other cooking classes for my sisterhood. I belong to a sisterhood at my temple up in Fremont. And so I've done a few, cooking classes for them too.
Awesome. And you're going to be doing applesauce. And
so we're going to do latkes, we're going to do applesauce, and we're going to do a apple tomatilla salsa.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so what I do want to mention to everybody, if you have any questions or anything, throw them in the chat box, and then I will ask Renee questions along the way. So feel free to ask. Actually, we have a small enough group, so if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, you could do that as well, or you could put it in the chat box.
Okay, great. All right, so the first thing I want to say is do not tell Uncle Max that I'm making latkes this way. I would be in big trouble with him. So I'm going to put that picture away and not let him watch. All right, so with the cheater's recipe, and here's the big cheat, I'm going to start with frozen hash browns. Now, I heard somebody say you had a lot of potatoes. If you want to grate the potatoes yourself, Uncle Max will be very happy. And you can do that with this recipe too. But a couple tips Uncle Max taught me about grating the potatoes yourself. Grate them into a bowl of water and let them soak in the water for, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And that gets the extra starch off. And then you want to make sure that you drain them really well. So if you're going to, grate your own potatoes, that's what I would suggest that you do. So I'm not going to do that because I'm starting the cheater's way with these frozen hash browns. So first off, if they're still frozen, a quick way to defrost them is to just rinse them in water. If you know you're going to make them ahead of time, what you can do is just stick them in the refrigerator the night before and they'll defrost themselves. But it is important to get all the moisture out. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to go ahead and take these potatoes, and let me just move things aside here a little bit. And I'm going to pour these into, or onto, I should say, a dish towel. So I like to use one that's not terry cloth, you know, one of the, I don't know what material you would describe, like a cotton dish towel. And so I'm just going to pour my rinsed potatoes right onto that. And I'll show you what I'm going to do in just a minute, but first what I'm going to do is get my onion going too, because I want to do the same thing to the onion. So again, Uncle Max's rule is you have to grate the onion by hand, but Uncle Max, sorry, I'm not going to do that either. I'm going to take another cheater shortcut. So you want about a half a cup of onions, but I like my latkes very oniony, so I'm going to use a little bit more. So I took a big onion, and I'm going to use a half of that big onion. And I like the bite of a white onion, but you can use yellow onion or whatever, you know, whatever kind you like. So I'm just going to peel this. And then here's the cheater's way to grate onions without grating your knuckles as well. I'm simply going to cut this onion into a couple of big chunks. I'll cut off this end too. That's it. And then I'm going to put them in the blender that has a little bit of water in it. So I already put the water in before we started. And you could use any kind of blender. There's nothing magic about this particular type of blender.
And why do you put the water in there?
I'm not exactly sure of the why, but it works. So I think without the water, it might just chop it up. With the water, it just gives it the right texture. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take this and just pulse it a few times. Oops. And then it's not, my cover's not all the way on. There, that's better. All right. I don't remember where I read this trick, but I learned it years ago, and it's a game changer. So I'm going to take this and drain it into, you know, my little strainer here to get most of the water out.
Well, it's an interesting trick. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that it keeps the juice from going out of the onion.
Yeah, that could be.
But I could be wrong. I'm just making it up.
And I'll just show you, you know, the general consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm going to just dump that in with the potatoes. And then here's the important part. You want to get all the moisture out of this whole thing. So I'm going to make a little bundle here. And then watch this. I'm just going to squeeze. Look at how much moisture is coming out of there. So if you want crispy latkes, and that's my goal, I don't like mushy latkes, I like crispy latkes, you want to get all the moisture out. So Uncle Max taught me this too, so I didn't forget everything Uncle Max. All right. That looks good. Okay, terrific. I'm going to set this aside so I don't knock it over. Let me put it behind me. All right, so I'm going to put my potatoes and my onions in a bowl. You can see they're nice and dry. And again, if you're doing this by hand, you know, you would soak the grated potatoes, and you know, you can either use by hand, or if you have a food processor that shreds potatoes, you could do that. Again, I'm a cheater, so I'm just using the hash browns that are already taken care of. So the next thing that we're going to need is we're going to need parsley. And I like to use the Italian parsley, but you can use any kind you like. And then we're going to chop that up. So if you like to use the stems, you can. I don't particularly like to do that in this recipe. I do in some other recipes, but so I just already pulled the leaves off. And I'm just going to give it a nice little chop on my cutting board here. So the recipe calls for about a 1/4 cup. That looks about right. So I'll throw that in there.
So there's a couple reasons why people say they put the water in the blender. One is because it keeps them from crying, so they don't have to chop it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and the other reason why is the onion doesn't get stuck to the blades. If you just put
that makes sense. That's kind of what I would think. So I'm going to mix the parsley in. Thank you for doing that research, Darlene. Next time I do the class, I'll know the answer to that, because the last time I did the class, somebody asked as well, but did I look it up? No.
I always look up everything.
What did we do before there was Google?
I know.
Right, so the next thing it's asking for is 2 tablespoons of milk. And I don't know why milk, but it does. So here's my little.
That's so cute.
Isn't that cute? I love this guy.
That's really cute. Although the milk's coming from the wrong part of the body.
You're right. That's true. Okay. And then the next thing that we want are 2 eggs, and you want to beat the eggs a little bit. So here's my eggs. We're going to use the whole egg. Uncle Max's recipe, I had to separate the eggs and beat the egg whites into stiff peaks and all that, but
that is so delicate the way you crack your eggs. I like slam the thing on the side of my bowl.
That's funny. Okay. So I'll put that into our little mixture here. And then the recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of flour. And I'm going to use flour, but there's also something called Matzo Meal. And, you know, a lot of people who make latkes, they like to put Matzo Meal instead. If you've ever seen matzah, it's like a big cracker.
I don't think so.
Matzo Meal is just
This
a
is
meal of that. It's, the crackers all ground up, but flour works just fine. And it's
What is
easier to find.
What is Matzo Meal, you called it?
Matzo Meal, yeah. Again, matzah is a big cracker. It's unleavened, and it's traditionally eaten at Passover, but you can eat it all year round. And the matzo meal is just ground up, so it's almost like cracker crumbs.
Or like breadcrumbs. It's like bread.
Yeah, it just gives it a different taste. Yeah, you could use breadcrumbs. I like the flour. It works just great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then finally we're going to put in a teaspoon of salt. And, you can adjust for how salty or not salty you like it, but put in salt. Looks good.
And you have to put a lot of salt when you're making potato recipes because it really soaks up the salt.
Yeah, it does absorb the salt. You're right.
Yeah.
Renee, was that a cup of flour?
No, it was just a 1/4 cup. And I think Darlene has the recipes. So
the recipe's in the discussion in the Facebook page.
Yeah, and if you want, I can give you my email address if you'd rather have it emailed to you in like a PDF. I can send it to you too. So
I can find it.
Okay. All right, so that looks good. Now, when you make potato latkes, you're going to fry them at a pretty high temperature. Because of that, you don't want to use olive oil. I know everybody's really into olive oil, and I like it too, but not for this recipe. So use an oil that's not going to burn at high temperature. So I'm using vegetable oil. And, you know, latkes are a celebratory dish, so it's not time to worry about being that healthy. So it's a splurge. You don't have them all that often.
Attitude.
Yeah. And so we're going to be pretty generous with the oil.
It's a strange thing, and it's kind of Darlene's thing. But I use oils that go with the country. Like I use corn oil for Mexican food. I use olive oil, Mediterranean food. I just use the oils that kind of are natural to that area.
That's a good
What's
idea.
Jewish oil? What would be Israeli oil, darling?
Jewish people went everywhere.
Olives. I mean, if you're talking about Israel, it's olives. Although what most people think of as Jewish food is not Israeli food. What most people think of as Jewish food is Eastern European food, because the majority of the Jews that, you know, came to the U.S., they came from Poland, Russia,
Spain,
Germany, some Spain, and not many from the Middle East really came to the U.S. You know, the Jewish people, they stayed in Israel. Right?
Yeah, the Ashkenazis.
So, you know, what I grew up eating, all this food that I always thought of as Jewish food, I brought a colleague to Chicago. We were both teaching a class together, and he was from Israel. And I was so excited to be in Chicago. And I said, oh, we're going to have all this great Jew food. He goes, oh, great. You know, so we went to this Jewish deli in Chicago, and he didn't recognize anything on the menu. He was like, what is this? So what I associated as Jewish food was really Eastern European food, right? Corned beef, you know, kugel, latkes, all this kind of stuff. It's really not Israeli food to him. You know, he was looking for falafel and, you know, those kinds of things.
Oh.
So it was funny. All right, so I think our oil is ready. And so I like to use my hands, but, you know, you don't have to. So I just take like a nice spoonful and then just form a nice little patty. And you can make them bigger, smaller, depending on, you know, what you're going to use them for. Sometimes you might, you know, make them for little appetizers, or if you're making a meal size one, you can make it bigger. And then you just put them in the oil.
What are some other foods?
I probably could have let the oil get a little bit hotter, but because it should like start sizzling.
Renee, what other foods do you eat at Hanukkah that are traditional?
Well, Hanukkah, it's potato latkes or anything actually fried in oil. So part of the Hanukkah story is the story of the temple. They only had enough oil to last one day, but it lasted 8 days. So you just fry stuff in oil. So another popular Hanukkah dish are these donuts. And Liz, you could say how to pronounce it. Sefiganet, I can never pronounce it. Sefiganet, something like that. Anyway, they're jelly donuts, but they're fried in oil. And other than that, really, you know, just something that goes with potato latkes. We always had fried chicken because that was fried also. So we're just going to let these cook, and you'll kind of see them change texture. So they'll start to be less moist, and then you'll know that they're going. And while these are frying, we're going to get started with the applesauce.
So about how much time on each side?
You know, I really don't have a time. I just do it by sight. I'm going to say maybe 5 minutes. We'll start with that. And then, you know, what you can do is kind of move them around a little bit too, to make sure that they're not sticking. But, you know, give them a nice opportunity to cook. So again, right now you can see the top is very moist, but we're gonna get it to where it's not. And like I said, I like to just make sure that they're not sticking, so I might move them around in the pan. Just give a little shush underneath each one.
I already forgot for some reason what you put in there. So what are those little speckle things?
Oh, that's parsley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I probably put more than it called for, but all right. You can, kind of smush them down a little bit. And I'm just going to leave those cooking until I see that it, looks like it's ready. And I'm going to switch over to applesauce now. Okay.
Can I share a tip that I learned from Gordon Ramsay?
Sure.
It has to do with when he was cooking scallops, and he always starts by the handle of the pan and he goes clockwise, and that way he knows which one he put in first and which one to, because scallops you only cook for like nanoseconds.
Right.
So I just sharing that tip to remind us where we started.
I love
That's
it.
a good tip. You learned that between his cussing?
I like Gordon Ramsay. He actually is a kind of a good person, even though he does kind of swear a lot and make people feel lousy.
Hey, I've heard that too. It's just an on-air persona.
Yes, yeah.
All right, so for the applesauce, we're going to start by peeling the apples. Now, I got this one started just because I didn't think you guys wanted to watch me peel an apple. So I'm just going to peel the rest of it. You can use an apple peeler instead, or whatever works for you. I find that it's, for me, faster to just do it with a knife. And the recipe calls for 4 apples. I'm just going to make applesauce with 1 apple. And I just want to let you know that you can make it with any number of apples, and I'm going to kind of give you some tips based on how much you're making. So I'm by myself. I don't really need that much applesauce. All right, so we've peeled the apple.
Can we come by for latkes later?
I know.
I'll deliver some to you, Liz. Let me rinse my knife off.
I was very fortunate to get some of the Jeannie's chocolate chip cookies last week.
Oh,
and they were so good. I mean, you don't think, but she had little tricks. Part of it was,
have to go back and watch that video. I couldn't attend that one.
Yeah, they were really, really good.
So
did you record? Did you record?
I did record. Yeah, this one's being recorded as well.
So I just cut around the core.
Renee, what kind of apple is that?
I just buy whatever's on sale, but you can use whatever you like. I also really like it with opal apples. It's delicious. And I want to show you the latkes. We're going to take a detour back to the latkes. These are ready to turn. You can see they're getting crisp around the edges, and you can see the top isn't moist anymore, right? It's changed its consistency. So I'm going to flip these. And since I didn't do what Gordon Ramsay taught me, I'm just going to see if I had listened to Liz ahead of time, I would have known. Aren't those beautiful?
They look good.
Beautiful.
What is your Facebook page for this group called?
Alum Rock Foothills.
Okay. So we don't have to live in the Alum Rock Foothills to join.
No,
unless Independence High School is close enough.
Yeah, I mean,
you're in the general neighborhood.
I just want to be able to get the notifications for future classes, because
I can send you an invitation to join too.
Yeah, that's probably the best way for her to send you an invitation.
Okay, thanks, Renee.
Cut these into small chunks. Not, that precise of a thing.
What are those knives called?
This is a ceramic knife. And
ceramic,
I absolutely love it because you don't have to sharpen them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're really light. So if you have arthritis, these are great too.
Mm.
I had taken a class at Sur La Table years ago called Knife Skills. And
Yes.
Of course they were selling knives, but one of the knives that they had us try that day was this ceramic knife, and I fell in love with it. And you know, I'm very careful with mine. I make sure I always put a sheath on it. I wash it as soon as I'm done so it doesn't break. And you know, the one thing that's bad is like things that are really hard, you don't want to cut with it. In fact, I wrecked one trying to cut into a squash, you know, delicata squash. It was too hard.
I just discovered delicata squashes this year.
Isn't it delicious?
So good.
And you just eat
What do they
them
look like?
on everything.
They look funny. They're funny looking. Here, I'll put a link for it. But they're really funny looking. I didn't know what it was because my sister dropped off some of them.
So I'm going to go ahead and put this in my pot here. Now, the recipe for applesauce that calls for 4 apples calls for 3/4 of a cup of water. But essentially, you know, use about 3 tablespoons per apple. That's a good judge, right? So if you're just making 1 apple, about 3 tablespoons is enough water. So I've got my water here. And you really don't need very much water because apples are full of moisture, right? They're full of water. They're going to give off the water. So I'm just going to put, you know, 2 tablespoons and just a little bit more. And just so that you can see, you can barely see, can you see that? You can barely see the moisture in there, hardly at all. And then you're going to want to put brown sugar in. And again, if you don't like your applesauce quite so sweet, you could do without any sugar or, you know, more or less to taste. So my general guideline is about 1 tablespoon of brown sugar for each apple. So about 3 tablespoons of water, about 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. Mix it in there, really nice. And then for cinnamon, I never measure it. I just start sprinkling till it looks good. So the recipe calls for 1/2 teaspoon for 4 apples, but I'm just gonna sprinkle a bunch of cinnamon on there. And then I really like cinnamon, and I stock at all times cinnamon sticks. So if I have a cinnamon stick, I'll throw that in there too. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to put this on top of the stove and you're going to let it boil, but it doesn't take long to boil. There's hardly any water in here at all. And you're going to put the cover on, turn it way down, and just let it simmer 20 to 25 minutes till the apples are nice and soft. And you're going to be amazed at how much more liquid there is in there once it does that. Now, I didn't think that we wanted to wait 20 to 25 minutes. So like Julia Child always did, I have the ones that I already cooked, right?
Thank you.
So you can get a feel for what that looks like. All right, so if you like chunky applesauce, all you do now is take this and take a masher. If you don't like chunky applesauce, if you like your applesauce smooth, then what you're going to do is, again, put it in a blender and pulse it. So I'm just going to do about half of this.
Where are you originally from? Well, originally from Tijuana,
Just pouring it in here.
Mexico, and my parents were both.
I guess I'll do it all. Here's my top. Oh, here it is. And my latkes are done. So let me just take a detour and take the latkes out.
So while she's doing that, I put in the chat box the YouTube channel for the Alum Rock Cook classes that we've had. So there's 3 classes. So if you click on that link, you'll see all the links for the classes. And then Renee's class will be on that same link at some point.
Thank you.
Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these latkes.
Okay, so Sonia, where are you originally from?
Well, I'm originally from Tijuana, Baja California.
Oh, can you, whoever clicked on the link, mute yourself?
My parents are both from Mexico. My mom is from Mazatlan.
Sorry about that.
Oh, thanks. I have a plate that I already have a paper towel on. I'll flip it over just so that you can see. They're nice and crispy. And then I just let them drain on a paper towel. Now, if I'm making a lot, what I'll do is I'll have the oven at about 200. I'll have a cookie sheet that I've lined with paper towels. And then as the first batch comes out, I just keep them warm in the oven, you know, at the 200. So I'll just, you know, drain them, and then I'll let them stay warm in the oven. And that's Latkes. That's simple. And they're delicious. Another thing that you could do is if you know, like green onions, you can, you know, sprinkle green onions over the top. And then when I found this recipe on the website where people were giving tips, some people actually suggested you could add cheese to it. Now, you know, that's not really a traditional latke, but it's delicious. I tried adding some Parmesan cheese to it, you know, like the good quality grated Parmesan cheese, and that came out great. But it sticks to the pan a little bit more because the cheese is getting a little bit melty. So that's the latkes. I'm going to set that aside. And now I'm going to just do my applesauce. So you saw everything that went into it. It's really just chopping up apples, a little water, a little brown sugar, and some cinnamon. And then when it comes out, again, if you like it smooth, put it in the blender. And if you like it chunky, I would just use a fork or a potato masher or whatever. And ta-da, you've got applesauce.
That's easy and fast.
Yeah, and your house is going to smell delicious. It's just fantastic.
Renee, what is the name of your, the brand of your processor, blender, contraption that does everything?
Oh, it's a Ninja.
Okay.
And it comes in a couple different, you know, it comes with like a big size, this size, and then a giant size. And then, you know, this goes on top. And I'll tell you the story of why I have this. My husband's a spiller. And I used to have, you know, just a regular kitchen, you know, a blender. And he always would make his chocolate milk, and it just explosions would go everywhere. And we'd fight over, you know, because he wouldn't clean it up, of course. And he wrecked like 2 or 3 blenders this way because they get, you know, chocolate milk stuck in there. So finally I saw this, and the motor's on the top. So even if he causes an explosion, it's not the motor or anything. So it saved my marriage. Kidding. All right, our final recipe for today is going to be our salsa. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with tomatillos. And I know a lot of you are very familiar with tomatillos on this call, but I wasn't. I, you know, didn't even know what they looked like when I first saw it. So in the store, it's going to have this husk on it, right? And I know in the salsa class, she talked a bit about tomatillos, and, you know, some stores you can even buy a whole bag full of them. So you want to take the husk off, snap the top off, and then it's going to be sticky. So what I did before we started is I just got a paper towel and wet it. And you're going to want to, you know, get that stickiness off. So the recipe calls for 5. I'm going to make half a recipe. And so I'm just going to use 2.5. And actually this one's so big, I think that I'll just use 2 with this gigantic one. But, you know, you could use 3 or whatever. So I don't need a whole. If I made the whole thing, it would last me a month. But this tomatilla salsa is delicious on fish. Trying to think some of the other things I've had it on. Chicken. So it's very versatile. It goes in all kinds of things. In fact, sometimes what I'll do is I'll even put it on my salad. Or if I'm making tuna salad or chicken salad, I'll put it in that. So it calls for a yellow onion, but I already have this you know, white onion cut open. So
I could see that tasting really good in chicken salad, the apple.
Oh, it's delicious in chicken salad. Because think about it, you know, you add apples to chicken salad. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and this one, I'm just going to use this technique where you start at the root and just sort of slice down, but not all the way to the root. And it really only calls for, the whole recipe calls for 1/4 of the onion. So I'm probably done here. I probably don't even need this much. So I'm gonna go ahead and chop these up. And then this calls for a tart apple. So, you know, something like Granny Smith would probably be best. Oops, I didn't peel this. I meant to peel this apple too. Let me do it right quick. And I suppose since you're putting it in the blender, you could leave the peel on. It's gonna essentially almost liquefy it anyway. And I'm not gonna be real picky about the peel. Okay. So Darlene, you could tell them other interesting things while I'm cutting up this apple. Talk a little bit about your caravan. I think that that's really a neat project that you have.
Well, yeah, I do the farm worker caravans where we take food and essential supplies to farm workers in the valley. We're going to start doing an Easter project. I don't know if some of you got the blessing bags that we did in the neighborhood last year. Did any of you guys get involved with the blessing bags?
No.
So I did that for Easter, and we had like so we're going to do that. But actually what I'm doing right now is not completely set up. There is a Girl Scouts that is the daughter of farm workers, Girl Scouts, and they work with migrant family daughters. And we're trying to set up something where we can help them sell cookies when they normally don't sell cookies, this troop, because they are migrants and they are not here year round. They do travel.
Yeah.
So they're not normally do the cookie sales, but we want to do that so it supports their troop. So I'm trying to set that up right now. Yeah.
Maybe we could go and like video them doing their sales pitch and post it on some of the neighborhood like our Alum Rock one and other ones, and then people can order online.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to set up right now, actually, as we speak, an online page for them, which they have them normally, you know, for the other girls.
Yeah.
There's just a little bit of a...
But we could interview some of the girls themselves doing a...
Yeah, they're supposed to do a video for us.
Yeah.
We're going to do a video and provide some
photos did that. So what I'm putting in here is cilantro.
I love cilantro.
You know, if you don't like it, then you don't have to use it. I know my daughter-in-law, cilantro tastes like soap to her, so she doesn't like it. But with cilantro, I actually always use the stems and the leaves. I include both. And then the other thing that goes in here is jalapeno. And I'm sure I'm not cutting it right, but this is what I do I cut around the seeds.
Well, yeah. I've never seen anybody cut a jalapeno like that, but it makes sense because I
learned this at that knife skills class for bell peppers and jalapeno peppers instead of, you know, pulling out the seeds to cut around the seeds.
Yeah, so all the heat, what she's doing, all the heat is in the seeds and predominantly in the stem, okay, which is that white part you see in the middle of a jalapeno.
Yeah.
That's where all the heat is. So if you don't want a lot of heat, that's what you need to remove.
Yeah. And so I have some of the seeds included, but not all. But again, like Darlene said, you can adjust based on, you know, how hot you want it.
Renee, how much cilantro did you use?
About 3 sprigs.
A tablespoon?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, I don't measure my cilantro either. I just kind of grab some and chop it up.
Yeah. Now, the recipe calls for agave, 2 tablespoons of agave. But the first time I made this, I was at my son's house and they didn't have agave. They had maple syrup. And it came out so delicious. When I made it with the agave, I didn't like it as well. So I just always used maple syrup. You know, it was my accident. So
that's real.
The whole recipe calls for 2 tablespoons. This is half a recipe, so I'm just going to use.
Yeah, and we talked about using real ingredients. I think last week, that's like a real maple syrup. It looks like she has. So a lot of what you see on the shelf is pancake syrup, which is not maple syrup. It's basically sugar.
Yeah, this is from Trader Joe's.
Yeah, so that's real maple syrup.
You can tell the difference by looking at the price.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. But the taste is very, very different. Maple syrup as opposed to pancake syrup.
And then you just, you know, salt to your taste. You can always add more salt. It's harder to get rid of it. So I would, you know, judge based on that. And then I have no idea what I did to the top of it. Here it is. I was planning on using my little bullet, but it didn't fit. So I'm going to use this one instead.
I love my little bullet.
Oh, I know. I do too. There we go. And so here you have potato latkes with applesauce, mango salsa, and then another very traditional thing to put on potato latkes is sour cream. So I have a little sour cream here. I thought I took everything out ahead, but I forgot the sour cream.
That looks yummy.
And there you have it. You know, and if I had cut some green onions, I would sprinkle that on the top.
That looks yummy.
Enjoy. You do not have to wait till Hanukkah to eat potato latkes. You can eat them anytime. They're delicious. And yeah, I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm looking for the invitation to the group so I can get your recipe.
I did put it in the chat box, the link to the group. So you could go on there and just go ahead. And is this Liz that's talking?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So go ahead, because I'm the one that admits people. We have a couple of admins, but if you do it right now, I'll just admit you.
Oh, okay. Here. All right. All right. Let's see if I can do this and mute. Turn off my sound. Hang on a second.
And so if that didn't work, Liz, as soon as we're done, I'll log on to Facebook and send you an invite if that didn't work.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and we have, I forget what the next class is. I should always look that up. I never do. But I know we have, Julie Ramirez is going to be making pozole, which is a very popular soup, pork and hominy soup. And then I'm going to be making lemon meringue pie. And I forget what the other ones are making, but we have a couple more classes coming up. If any of you want to teach a class as well, let me know. Just message me, Darlene Tennis, in the group, and then we can set you up so you can teach a class. But let's all really thank Renee. This was great. I'm inspired to make those potato pancakes. Even today, I might do it because they look.
Yeah, it's a great Super Bowl snack.
Yeah, so that's great.
Okay, so simple.
We'll see you later. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Darlene. That was great. Good class.
Thank you.
It was great, Renee.
Thank you, Renee.
Thanks, Darlene, for organizing this. It just is really great.
Yep. Thank you, Renee.
Okay,
Darlene, I just submitted my submitted my membership. I don't know.
Okay, I'll return. Okay, bye everyone. I'm
All
gonna
right, thank